All right, there's been some hot takes building up in my comment section, so I thought it's about time to go ahead and check them out. We're going to jump right into it. First hot take is from Todd. Todd says this: I want to see these quarterbacks go against Ohio State's defense, since it's the only thing close to an NFL level defense before we say they're actually good. Too many college quarterbacks get too much time compared to the NFL. If it speeds up, they can't handle it. We need to see it react against large amounts of consistent pressure and coordinators that are actively trying to trick them instead of just line up and say, beat me if you can. I think you're greatly underestimating what goes on in the rest of these power conferences. Like, yeah, Ohio State is the best team in college football, and yeah, they're the most talented team in college football, but they're not the only team in college football with NFL talent on their defense, and especially in the Big Ten, especially in the SEC, especially, well, those are the two conferences that we're talking about the top prospects coming from, right? Like, most of the guys we're talking about are power conference guys. There are tons of very experienced defensive coordinators that are trying to fool these guys every week, right? It's not like it's just nothing until you play Ohio State. So I don't like that framing of it. Yeah, would you like to see them go up against Ohio State because Ohio State looks like they're going to be the measuring stick for this season? And to be fair, it's not like we've seen Ohio State play a ton of teams this year, a ton of like highly ranked teams this year. We're not going to really see that until they get to the playoff. I know Michigan's ranked this year, but I think Ohio State's significantly better than Michigan. All that being said, yeah, you want to see these guys play Ohio State, sure, and you would like a nice showing. But, I mean, like, especially in the case of like a guy like Ty Simpson, who's played like 8 ranked opponents back-to-back on the road almost, like, the Ohio State game's not going to be that big of a factor for him, right? Like, he's played a lot of NFL talent in the SEC, a lot of ranked teams. I think he's played the most ranked teams of all the quarterbacks that we're talking about. When you talk about Mendoza, I mean, that Oregon defense is really good. The Iowa defense is pretty solid as well. That's a good test there. And then you also have, what if he plays Ohio State? We'll see how he looks there. In the playoff, we'll see how he looks there. I don't want to just make it be like, well, if he didn't look good against Ohio State, then no, I'm not going to draft you. I think that's a bit silly. But yeah, I think you do want to see them in playoff games, in conference championship games look good. But that's not to say that there are no, significant challenges other than Ohio State in college football. Like, look, I know there's a lot of Ohio State fans that watched the video, and I will concede that Ohio State is probably the best team in the country and the front runner to win the national championship this year. And they do probably have the best defense in the country and the best offense in the country. But like the level of self-glaze in that sentence, what we're talking about, because you're not playing Ohio State, like, oh, nobody's getting pressured, nobody's going against coordinators trying to trick them. That's just self-Ohio State glaze right there. That's not reflective of the reality of college football. Regardless of if they play Ohio State or not. They're gonna have. They've had some challenges on their roster. Every single quarterback that we've talked about in the 2026 draft. And I think it's unfair to act like Ohio State is that much better than the rest of college football, or like the only team trying to trick people on defense. That's insane. A lot of money goes into coaching in college football. All right, let's get to the next one. The Josh says this: I think if we manage to land one of the top 3 quarterbacks, then we obviously take that. But if not, I think we just load up on weapons with the line, the first 2 picks, and take Carnell Tate and Tyson, maybe a tackle, just take 2 top receivers. I mean, if they can't get a quarterback, they're going to go best player available, right? And that's going to be based on their board. To be fair to the Browns, outside of the one time they picked for position in the first or second round, which was Jedrick Wills, all the best player available picks in the first 2 rounds have been pretty solid. You know what I mean? So if they go best player available, they're probably going to get somebody good, and that's going to benefit them in the long run, right? If they get a good player, because as I like to say and remind people, We talk about, oh, we need to draft the position to address it. You're not addressing anything if the player's not good. So if you don't think that there's a great path for that player at that position to be a great player for you, then you have no business drafting them because they're not going to fix it, right? You can't force it into place. So, you got to draft players you think can be successful in your system. But we're going to get to the next hot take. But before I do, got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. This was an interesting exchange of comments here between two people in my comment section I thought I'll highlight. So KR Thunder starts this off with saying, I really wonder how Chad O'Shea has missed skepticism within the organization these past 5 years. Down Brown says, I understand your comment, but it's not like they drafted some blue chip wide receiver and he's been a bust. Judy looks just like he did in Denver. Couldn't wait to get rid of him. Who else? Mid-late round guys. Amari Cooper broke a record here before he fell off. And Jerry Judy had a record year here. So, I get why people want Chad O'Shea gone because the development on the offensive side of the ball has not been great. It's just, how do I put this? Putting my anger about the Browns offense, as big as the problems are, on Chad O'Shea, it doesn't feel proportional. Is Chad O'Shea probably a part of the problem? Maybe. But is Chad O'Shea, is getting rid of him going to solve the problem? I doubt it. I think you could probably solve the problem with Chad O'Shea here. You could solve it without Chad O'Shea. At the end of the day, he's a wide receivers coach. And he's just not that important. Like, he's just a position coach. I highly doubt he is so bad at his job. I mean, this is somebody who, he was the wide receiver coach for the Patriots dynasty for a while. So I highly doubt he is so bad at his job that he's going to stop you from being successful because he's done his job on successful teams. So this idea that like Chad O'Shea is so bad at wide receiving coach, that if you get rid of him, you solve your problems, which is what people tend to try to sell when they're mad at Chad O'Shea because they want something done about the offense, but they don't want to fire Kevin. It's just ludicrous. Like, if your problem is Chad O'Shea, your problem's probably Kevin. Like, if we're being real about it, we can't just sit here and be like, it's literally everybody else. It's the offensive coordinator, it's the wide receiver coach. If your problem is Chad O'Shea, then it's likely that the actual problem is somebody with more responsibility, like the head coach. So, that's why I don't think people focus a lot of energy on Chad O'Shea and firing him, because it just feels petty. It's like, well, we gonna get mad at Chad O'Shea with the offense? Like, all the Browns offense looks like how it looks. I'm supposed to focus all that shit on Chad O'Shea? Are you kidding me? Like, well, while we're at it, why not fire the tight ends coach? Why not fire the offensive line coach, right? Like, if your problem isn't just Chad O'Shea, I think that's the problem, or that's the reason why people aren't just like jumping on Chad O'Shea. The problems aren't just him, Oliver Truman says this: you're way too impressed with this Mickey Mouse Coach of the Year award, dude. He inherited a winning roster. People say this about Kevin. What was the team's record before Kevin got there? What was the Browns' record before Kevin got there? He inherited a winning roster. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not think the 2019 Browns were a winning football team. Let's look that up real quick. Let's be accurate. The 2019 Browns were 6-10. So not inheriting a winning roster. Him or Andrew Berry. Honestly, this is complete revision. Again, you can want Kevin fired without having to lie about his successes in the past. We don't got to lie. We don't got to act like he's done nothing impressive. We have this tendency where it's all or nothing with somebody, where it's like, oh, well, either you want this guy here and you think he's the greatest guy ever, or you don't want him here and he's always been terrible secretly. The Steelers fans are doing this right now with Mike Tomlin, where they're like, oh, well, we want him fired. So he was actually shitty the whole time and he was a Bill Cowher creation, giving him no credit for his accomplishments over 20 years. We don't have to do this. We really don't have to. This is a very stupid way to do things, because now when you rewrite history to justify some shit that you do, you forget history and then you repeat it. His Coach of the Year awards were earned. What he did in 2020 was impressive. What he did in 2023 was impressive. That doesn't change the fact that what's happened in 2024 and 2025 justifiably should get him fired. Those two things can be true. It's not crazy, right? This idea that he inherited a winning roster. The Browns' offensive line was a complete shit show before Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry got here. They're the guys who put the pieces in place, who put together that offensive line that allowed guys that you mentioned here, like Nick Chubb, right? That allowed guys like Nick Chubb to be their full self. Right? Myles Garrett. He's like, oh, you inherited the best defensive player in Myles Garrett. Well, Myles Garrett wasn't that when Kevin got here. Myles Garrett was a guy who the last coaching staff had playing with one arm tied behind his back because they only wanted him to use one pass rush move. That was Greg Williams. That was 2019. Myles Garrett gets under Kevin Stefanski and Kevin Stefanski's choices. And look, I think Joe Woods was terrible, but the one thing that did happen under Joe Woods was that Myles got better. And then they fired Joe Woods, brought in Jim Schwartz, and Myles got even better. Kevin deserves credit for that. This wasn't some magical fucking roster in 2019. People are rewriting history. And you would swear by the way that people talk about John Dorsey in 2019 that the Cleveland Browns were like this amazing fucking football team in 2019. I went to every home game in 2019. The Browns sucked in 2019. It's driving me nuts that people are like dead set on trying to convince people who were actually there, who actually watched those games, who covered those games in real time, that 2019 was actually a magical season. Are you fucking serious? Inherited a winning roster. He won Coach of the Year because he won 11 games with the team that won 6 the year before. We're talking about inheriting a winning roster. Did the roster have talent? Yeah, I think the roster had talent, but that talent clearly wasn't being utilized with the previous coaching staff and the previous general manager because they were winning 6 games up to that point and hadn't gone over 500 in both of the years of John Dorsey, and then obviously didn't go over 500 with Hugh, didn't go over 500 with Freddie Kitchens. So why are we acting like that didn't happen? It doesn't mean you have to keep him. It doesn't justify keeping Kevin Stefanski. But why are we acting like things that happened did not happen? He did a good job in 2020. He put a lot of the pieces in the right place in 2020 and 2023. And unfortunately, the last 2 seasons, he has not done that same thing, which is why it's justifiable to fire him. That's really it. It's really that simple. Like, I'm so tired of the revisionist history that goes on around him, that goes on around Baker Mayfield. I talked about this so much when the Browns were ready to get off of Baker Mayfield because Browns fans did the same shit about Baker, where all of a sudden he never flashed. He was always trash. And I was like, he had some moments. And you get called a Baker stan for saying that. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. We don't have to rewrite history just because it's time to move on. We can say, hey, things went well here, but this is where we're going. This is what you've brought to the table the last few years. I would like to go in a different direction. That's how adults move on from things. You know what adults don't do when they move on from things? Just trash the shit out of the thing that they're moving on from. If somebody sees you do that in the adult world, they're going to look at you like you're a fucking child. Because that's what children do. When they have to move on from something, they can't reckon with the fact that, hey, it's just time to move on. Doesn't mean anybody shit. You know, they got to make a whole narrative up. Kevin was good. There was a lot of justification to keep him the last couple of years. But these last 2 seasons, it just hasn't been going the way that you want it offensively. And you're about to draft the quarterback. And if you're not sure about the direction of the team offensively, I think you should make a change. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. It's not one or the other. Let's be fucking adults. Like, I'm so tired of the childish narratives that we keep getting stuck into as sports fans because we can't accept that one or two things can be true at the same time. It always has to be a binary choice. That's not how that's not how life works. It's not how the world works. It's not how sports work. Multiple things can be true at the same time. And that's what makes shit complicated. And that's why this shit isn't easy. Let's move on to the next hot take. Bernard says this. Quincy, the significance of Kevin giving up play calling really has little to do with calling plays. It's the significance of how it can change the time role for Kevin. It theoretically will allow Kevin to have space to provide more oversight for all the phases of the team's importance. I also believe it means something as we move forward with regards to Kevin's role. This is particularly important to trying to evaluate Kevin's future with the Browns. Let me sit with this one because this is interesting. I can, on one hand, see the Browns saying to themselves, hey, we have 2 rookie quarterbacks we're about to play. One that we've been playing and he struggled. Maybe what we need is somebody on the sidelines because we don't have a veteran quarterback back there that can help our quarterbacks, our young quarterbacks, inexperienced quarterbacks on the sideline. So in order to do that, Tommy Rees has to call the plays and Kevin's going to help him on the iPad, do all the other stuff. Now we'll see if that's actually what's happening, right? If Tommy Rees calling plays is to free up Kevin to do some of that stuff. It might be the case that Tommy Rees is going to call plays and Kevin's going to be standing on the sideline doing the same shit he does during the game when he's calling plays. And if that's the case, yeah, I mean, it kind of feels kind of pointless. But, you know, maybe if that's like, if this is like for some kind of specific role, and we'll see on Sunday because this stuff will be visible to the camera, if Kevin's working with the quarterbacks one-on-one individually more, and that makes a difference, then okay, cool, whatever. You know, that if you found a way to make it work, you found a way to make it work. You know, because you are going to be playing rookie quarterbacks the rest of the way. Shadour's going to get in at some point. And if you want those rookie quarterbacks to succeed and you think that having somebody on the sideline walk them through the play, walk them through the expectations, walk them through what they need to know each time, give them that education as they're playing instead of Kevin having to be focused on what the play call is and what the defense is doing and everything else, then fine. Okay. Like, we'll see if that works. But if that's not what's going on, then this is kind of a moot point because it's not what they're doing. But yeah, I can see a world where that's why they made the move, but we got to make sure that's why they actually made the move before we give them credit for that. Running AWOL says, I didn't think they needed to go crazy at all at the trade deadline. I thought it would be the biggest mistake to do what the Jets did. Cleveland has done way too many fire sales. The Watson trade is what is weighing us down. It doesn't matter what we do. Getting out from under Watson is going to be the only way Cleveland will ever start to do anything. We're just stuck right now. Yeah, I mean, some people would argue that maybe getting the extra draft assets would help you dig out from the Watson trade. But I think if it's going to come at the expense of players that you plan to keep long term, because keep in mind, the Jets traded 2 guys under 27, 2 former top 10 picks under 27. Like, you won't want those guys to be a part of your next window, right? Like, if you hit on a quarterback in 2027, you're going to be pissed that you don't have both those guys. So we'll see if that works out for New York, right? I don't want to condemn a trade before we even know what's going to happen. I feel like people do that far too often. We're like years away from being able to figure out if what the Jets did was a mistake or not. And I agree with the point that, like, the Browns have done a lot of fire sales in the past. It hasn't really gotten the result that Browns fans think it gets. To a certain point, what the Browns need to do is just move on from the Watson era. It's a failed era. They're living through the worst of it. And, next year needs to be about digging out from the failures of the Deshaun Watson era. Like, it's just what it's going to have to be. You had to take your lumps this year. You had to eat your medicine. It sucks. Even the most optimistic projections this year were under 500. And even then, the Browns are under those expectations. It's disappointing. You're wasting one of the greatest years of Myles Garrett's career. It sucks. You got to take your medicine, but you got to move on to the next era, right? It kind of reminds me, and if you're not a WWE fan, I don't even watch it anymore, but if you watched in the 90s or about the Attitude Era, right? What most people don't talk about is the mid-90s for WWE, or at the time WWF, right, where they were transitioning from the Hulk Hogan era and all of this stuff, and then they got hit by the steroid trial, so they had to let go of all those stars and go a different direction and basically rebuilt this thing. There were a couple of rough years there for the WWF, right? They almost went out of business. WCW got really hot with the NWO. It looked like it was going to be over for the WWF, but they stayed on track. They developed the young stars that they had, and they came out of it as good as they've ever been. In 97, 98, you get Stone Cold, you get Triple H, you get The Rock. Everybody knows these names. Right? The Undertaker gets reborn, all this stuff, Mankind, Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, all this shit. They just explode because, they took their lumps, they developed, they committed to that development, and it was rough for a couple of years. They got shat on for a couple of years. People saying the wrestlers are too small, and they don't have the star power, and then everything started to click for them. They got the right pieces in place. Stone Cold emerges. Which is the equivalent of hitting on a quarterback, and boom, they're back in business, and they've never looked back since then, right? Sometimes you got to take your L, okay? Like, that's just life. If you ever lived through enough life, you know that there are just times in life where you just got to take your L and move on with it, right? Like, all right, the Watson trade was a loss. There's no fixing it. Let's not try to make things worse fixing it. Let's just eat the L. It's going to be painful, but then we can move on and build towards something better in the future. That's the hope for the Browns. This sucks. What we're living through right now sucks. Everything about this season sucks. But what this season can give Browns fans are the seeds that they need to blossom into an era of football that hopefully we cherish for the rest of our lives. That is the hope, that this suffering turns into something that can net you a franchise quarterback, that can net you an offense that's worth a damn. And I know it's hard to believe that because Browns fans have been conditioned to be beat down and believe that nothing good can happen to you. But every other fan base that have turned it around felt the same way as you. Buffalo fans, before they hit on Josh Allen, felt the same shit as you. The Lions fans, before they got hit on Dan Campbell and Jared Goff, felt the same shit as you. It turns around. It always turns around. And the Browns are at a place where they've hit on some draft picks. If they hit on draft picks this year and they get a quarterback, which they're in a position to be able to possibly do, they can turn it around. But it's not going to be comfortable in the meantime. We're going to have to keep eating this L for the rest of the season, and that sucks. But hopefully it builds towards something better. That's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.